She was standing on his porch at 6 in the morning with a weekend bag over her shoulder and a look in her eyes that said she had already burned the bridge she crossed to get there. Ethan Cross had not expected her to actually show up. He had said it as a joke. Come to the lake if you want. The way you say things to someone you assume will never take you up on them. But Victoria Sterling was not someone who did things halfway. And somewhere in the space between his careless invitation and this particular dawn, she had decided that halfway was no longer something she was willing to settle for. This is a story about two people who were never supposed to need each other and the quiet, stubborn way they did anyway. If this is your kind of story, hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. I want to see just how far this one travels. The workshop smelled like it always did. Sawdust and linseed oil and something underneath both of those things that Ethan had never been able to name exactly, but that felt, to him, like the closest thing to calm he knew anymore. He was sanding the arm of a 1940s mahogany armchair when his daughter appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, her hair going in 4 different directions, holding her empty cereal bowl like evidence. "Dad? Morning, Bug. There's no milk. There's oat milk." Lily made a face that communicated, clearly and without ambiguity, that oat milk did not count as milk, and that she was registering a formal objection to its existence. She was 7 years old and had recently developed opinions about things Ethan had not considered worthy of opinions. Cereal beverages, the direction cabinet doors should swing, the specific way a sandwich ought to be cut. He found it equal parts exhausting and quietly funny, though he had learned not to let on that he found it funny, because then she just escalated. "We have orange juice," he offered. "With cereal? People do it." "People are wrong." He set the sandpaper down. "Give me 20 minutes and I'll make eggs." That seemed acceptable. She retreated back toward the house, a narrow Craftsman on Winding Creek Road in Asheville, North Carolina, the kind of house that had needed a lot of work when he bought it and still needed a fair amount, but was his, unambiguously and entirely, and Ethan stood in the doorway of his workshop watching the street wake up. It was early September, and the mountains around Asheville were starting to do the thing they did every fall, the slow burn from green to gold, and even from a porch on a residential street you could feel it coming like a change in pressure. The air had that particular sharpness. The light was different. Everything was getting ready to be something else. Across the street, the Sterling house showed no signs of life. It rarely did, at this hour. The house was substantially larger than his, not aggressively so, not in the way that was meant to make you aware of the disproportion, but in the way of a place that had been built to hold more than one person's ambitions. Dark gray stone and clean modern lines, the landscaping precise and a little airless. It looked like something out of an architecture magazine, which Ethan had always assumed was the point. He had moved into the neighborhood 14 months ago, after the divorce was finalized and the money was divided, and he had sat in a half-empty apartment for 6 weeks before concluding that whatever came next needed to start somewhere different. The Sterling house had been part of the view from the beginning, present, contained, not particularly welcoming. He had nodded at the woman who lived there a few times in passing without much registering beyond neighbor, professional, private, the way you catalog the people around you without actually opening any files. It was the coffee mug that changed things, or rather, it was the morning she knocked on his door holding it. He had been on his porch with his own coffee at 6:40 in the morning, the first week of August, a Friday, when she appeared at the end of his front walk. She was already dressed for the office, charcoal blazer, heels on a porch step, dark hair pulled back in the particular way of someone who had done the calculation between polished and approachable, and landed on a midpoint that communicated authority without inviting argument. He recognized her then as Victoria Sterling, which he knew only because his neighbor Greta, who lived 2 doors down and was constitutionally incapable of leaving useful information unshared, had mentioned her several times. CEO of some tech company, or was it finance? She travels constantly. Have you ever actually seen her husband? "Hi," she said. She was holding a mug at her side, one of those thick ceramic ones, and even from a distance he could see it had a chip on the rim. "I'm sorry to bother you. I'm Victoria, across the street." "I know," he said. "Ethan." "I know," she said. There was the briefest thing in her expression, Not quite humor, but adjacent to it, the kind that comes from acknowledging shared absurdity. I have a slightly embarrassing situation. My espresso machine decided this morning was a good time to stop working, and I have a call at 7, and I'm completely useless without. She gestured vaguely, acknowledging the whole condition. Would you happen to have regular coffee? I can survive on regular coffee. I have regular coffee, he said. I will be your most grateful neighbor. He filled the mug she was holding. She had brought her own, which he found oddly thoughtful, or maybe just independent, or maybe she was someone who did not like to use other people's things. And she thanked him and went back across the street, and that was that, except that the next morning she knocked again, and the morning after that, until at some point it became a thing that simply happened without either of them commenting on it becoming a thing. He never asked about the espresso machine. She never mentioned getting it fixed. They talked, during those mornings, not about anything consequential, at first. The weather, the neighborhood, a tree that had come down on the corner after the last big wind. She asked once what he did, and he explained the furniture restoration business. He had been a contractor before, residential renovations, but something about taking broken things and returning them to themselves had started to feel more honest to him somewhere around the time his marriage was ending. She had listened carefully, in the way of someone who was actually tracking what you were saying rather than waiting for the space to say their own thing. He asked, eventually, what she did. She said she ran a company, data infrastructure, enterprise software, medium-sized and growing. She said it the way people say things they are competent at, but tired of being defined by. He didn't ask about the husband. She didn't offer. Lily had discovered the coffee arrangement sometime in mid-August and responded to it in the manner of a small person who considers all transactions passing through her father's house to be, in some sense, her business. "Who's that?" she demanded one morning, appearing at Ethan's shoulder while Victoria was still visible crossing the street. "Neighbor, Victoria." "Why does she come here every morning?" "Coffee." "Why doesn't she get her own coffee?" "She does. That is her coffee." "She should get a machine," Lily said with the certainty of someone who has solved a problem and is mystified why anyone would continue to have it. "Noted," Ethan said. "She's pretty," Lily added, as if this were a relevant data point in the coffee logistics analysis. "Go eat your breakfast." "She has a nice mug." "Lily?" She went. But the next morning, when Victoria appeared, Lily materialized at the door again and said, with the directness of someone who had not yet learned to be self-conscious, "Hi, I'm Lily. My dad told me your name is Victoria." Victoria looked at her, really looked, not the reflexive warmth adults sometimes perform at children, and said, "That's right. And your dad told me your name is Lily." "He did?" "He did." Lily processed this. "Your mug has a chip," she said. "It does." "Does it bother you?" Victoria looked at the mug. "It used to," she said. "Now I kind of like it." Lily thought about this with great seriousness. "Because it's different from the other mugs?" "Something like that." Lily nodded, apparently satisfied, and disappeared back into the house. Victoria looked up and found Ethan watching from behind the screen door with an expression he was not fast enough to fully neutralize. "She's something," Victoria said. "She is that," he agreed. The way Victoria smiled then, not performed, not measured, just a real thing that moved across her face and left. That was the moment, though he would not identify it as a moment for a long time. The way some things only become visible when you are finally far enough away to see them whole. He had heard the argument once. It was a Thursday night in late August, windows open because the evening had cooled enough to make that worthwhile, and Ethan was in the workshop finishing a refinishing job on a dining table. Cherry wood, nice bones. Someone had covered it in a polyurethane lacquer that was slowly being stripped off layer by patient layer. He had his earbuds in, but not anything playing, just muscle memory and quiet, when he heard voices from across the street. Not words, initially, just tone. The particular tension in raised voices trying not to be raised, the way arguments sound when they have learned to stay inside. Then a door. Then actual quiet. He did not think much of it. People argued. He and Christine had argued, not often toward the end because by then they were both too tired and too certain, and the arguments had become unnecessary. But he recognized the sound. He recognized what it meant when a house went that quiet afterward. The next morning, Victoria came for coffee later than usual, and she looked like someone who had made a decision not to look like what she looked like. He gave her the coffee, and she thanked him, and they talked about something inconsequential, a farmer's market she had been to, a vendor who sold good honey. And he did not ask, and she did not offer, and that was fine. That was what they were. But he noticed she held the chipped mug for a long time before she crossed back over. The invitation happened on a Tuesday, the second week of September. He had been loading equipment into his truck. He had a pickup job in Weaverville, an old school desk someone wanted restored for a kid's bedroom, and Victoria was getting into her car across the street. She was on the phone, the kind of call where you are agreeing with someone while clearly not agreeing, and she caught his eye and made a face that communicated something he understood without needing it translated. "This is my life, and I am tired of it right now." He laughed, short and involuntary, and she almost laughed, and then she was talking to the phone again and getting in the car. He finished loading the truck. He stood there for a moment in the September morning and thought, for the first time in a conscious way, about the cabin. His parents had owned it since before he was born, 2 hours east, in a small community on Lake Lure, the water deep and cold and the mountains folding down around it on all sides. He had inherited it 3 years ago when his father passed, and had managed to get up there 4 or 5 times since. It was not a grand place. Screen porch, 2 bedrooms, a dock that needed a board replaced at the far end. But it had always felt like the place where the volume came down, where whatever noise his life was making went quiet enough to hear himself. He had planned to go that weekend. A few days, just him and Lily, close out the summer before school consumed everything. When Victoria came for coffee the next morning, he was on the porch, and it came out of his mouth the way things do when you are not being careful. "You look like you need a lake." She was lifting the mug. She stopped. "Excuse me?" "I'm taking my daughter to my family's cabin this weekend, Lake Lure. It's nothing fancy, but it's quiet. I was just—" He heard himself saying it and managed to stop, almost in time. It was a stupid thing to say. "Never mind." She looked at him for a moment in a way he could not read. "What time Friday?" she said. "What? What time are you leaving Friday?" "Victoria, I wasn't actually—" "Ethan." Something in how she said it, flat and clear, no room for performance in it. "What time?" He looked at her. 6 in the morning, he said. "I know that's—" "I'll be there," she said. She handed him the empty mug and walked back across the street. He stood on his porch holding the mug in both hands, staring after her, and then looked down at the chipped rim and thought, with some bewilderment, "Okay then." He told Lily that evening, in the kind of careful way you tell a 7-year-old something that requires some preparation. "Victoria might come to the cabin this weekend," he said. Lily looked up from her drawing. She was working on something with a lot of blue in it. She had been in a blue phase for 3 weeks. "The coffee lady?" "The coffee lady." She considered this. "Does she know about the frogs?" "What frogs?" "The lake frogs. They're loud at night." "I'll let her know about the frogs." "And the dock thing, the loose board, so she doesn't step on it." "I'll brief her on the dock." Lily returned to her drawing. Then, without looking up, "She can have the room with the yellow quilt if she wants. It's the nicest." "That's generous of you, Bug." "I know," Lily said simply. Friday morning arrived with the particular quality of fall mornings in Asheville, clean and slightly cold at the edges, the sky going pale before it went blue. Ethan was in the driveway loading the truck at 5:45. He had told himself he was not watching for her. He loaded 2 bags, Lily's small pink duffel, the cooler, the tackle box he probably wouldn't use. He checked that he had the propane. He found he was watching for her. At 6:03, the front door of the Sterling house opened. She came down the walk with a single bag and a travel cup, and she was wearing something he had not seen her in. Dark jeans and a simple olive jacket, hair down, no makeup that he could detect. She looked different. Not better or worse, just different. Like a version of herself that had been somewhere in storage. "You actually came," he said. "I told you I would." "I know, I wasn't—" He stopped himself. That's fair. I wasn't sure I believed me. She looked at him. You didn't think I'd come? I thought there was maybe a 30% chance. 30, she repeated, and something moved across her face that was not quite offense and not quite amusement, and was, he thought, some combination of both being run through whatever filter she ran things through before they came out. Okay. Lily said to tell you there are frogs at night. She wanted you to have accurate information before you committed. I appreciate that. She also assigned you the room with the yellow quilt. You should know she considers that a significant gesture. Victoria looked at him. Then I'll take it seriously, she said. They drove out of Asheville in the early morning quiet, Lily in the back seat with her headphones and a chapter book about a girl who solves things with science, Victoria in the passenger seat with her hands around the travel cup. The mountains rose and fell on either side of the highway. Nobody talked much, and the not talking had a texture to it that was not uncomfortable, which struck Ethan as unusual enough to notice. He put on the radio low, a country station that faded and came back as they moved through the hills, and at one point Victoria said, without looking away from the window, I haven't left Asheville on a weekday in 4 months. This is Friday. I mean, I've been in the city for 4 months without going anywhere. He glanced over. Is that? It's fine, she said, then quieter. It's not fine. But it's over, so? He left that alone. She seemed to want it left alone. An hour and 40 minutes later, they came down the county road along the lake, and the cabin appeared through the trees. Wood-sided, deep-porched, considerably less photogenic than it was in his memory, but real in a way that felt reliable. He parked in the gravel, and Lily was out of the car before the engine was off, running for the dock. Off the end with the loose board, Ethan called. I know, she called back. Victoria stepped out of the truck and stood beside it and looked at the lake. It was still in the morning, the surface holding the sky. The mountains came down to the water's edge on the far side. Ethan, she said. Yeah. This is... She stopped. I needed this. I didn't know I needed it until right now, and it's already too much. He looked at her, and she was not crying exactly, but she was doing the thing adjacent to it, the thing where you have held something for too long, and the first moment of putting it down is almost worse than the carrying. Come on, he said. I'll make coffee. Lily will show you the frogs. She laughed, sharp and honest, and then she pressed her hand to her sternum for a moment, the way you do when you are trying to hold something in long enough to take a breath, and then she picked up her bag and followed him toward the porch. The first day was mostly silence, not the uncomfortable kind, not the kind that needs filling. Victoria sat on the porch with a book she barely looked at and watched the lake. Ethan took the canoe out with Lily in the afternoon and let the day be what it was. He made dinner, pasta, the kind that required no attention, sauce from a jar, which he made some peace with, and the three of them ate on the porch table while the light went gold over the mountains. Lily talked steadily through dinner the way she did when she was comfortable, covering topics that moved without warning. Whether fish had feelings, the structural mechanics of spider webs, the name she would give a dog if she were allowed to have one. Biscuit, the name had already been assigned. It was simply a matter of the dog materializing. Victoria listened and asked questions, real ones, not the patronizing kind adults give children when they are performing attention. She asked Lily's opinion on things and then actually listened to the answer. What do you think about the fish question? Lily asked her. The feelings question? Yeah. I think probably they feel something, Victoria said. I just think it's different enough from what we feel that we can't really imagine it from the inside. So they feel things, but they don't know they're feeling things? Maybe, or they know in a different way. Lily ate a bite of pasta, processing. Like how Dad knows things are wrong, but sometimes takes a while to say it. Ethan pointed his fork at her. That's a separate conversation. Victoria covered her smile with her water glass. Later, after Lily was in bed, she had taken the room with the bunk beds, relinquishing the yellow quilt with generosity. Ethan and Victoria sat on the porch in the dark with mugs of tea, listening to the frogs. The lake was invisible from here but present. You could feel the depth of it, the cold, something that large holding still. Can I ask you something? Victoria said. Sure. Lily's mom, is she, are you... She stopped. I'm sorry, that's not my business. It's all right. He thought about how to say it. There were, he had found, different versions of the story available to him, depending on who was asking and why, and he was still not sure which one was most accurate. We were married for 5 years. We were probably not suited for it for at least the last 2. The divorce was what it was. She moved to Portland. We do holidays. We do summers when Lily can travel. It's functional. He paused. Lily handles it better than I do. She's more adaptable. She gets that from her mother. What do you get from it? Which part? The divorce. What did you come away with? He thought about that honestly. The workshop. I had the woodworking thing before, but I was doing renovations because it paid better. When everything else changed, I stopped thinking about what paid better. He looked at the lake, or where the lake was. And Lily, obviously, though that's not a what, she's the whole thing. Everything else is organized around her. Victoria was quiet for a moment. You don't talk about yourself like someone who's had a hard time. I've had a hard time. I know, but you don't hold it like bitterness. It's more like weight, he said. Not bitterness, weight. Is there a difference? He thought about it. Bitterness is about someone else, he said finally. Weight is just yours. She looked at him across the porch in the dark, and he could see her face clearly enough to know something had landed in what he said, had touched something she recognized. I'm going to be divorced, she said. He had not known that. He had suspected something was wrong, from the sounds, from the morning face she sometimes had, from the way she never mentioned Damien unless asked, and even then gave only surface-layer answers. But he had not known it had become a decision. Okay, he said. I filed 3 weeks ago. No one knows yet. My lawyers know. My assistant has guessed. She looked down at her mug. I haven't told anyone because I haven't known what to say yet. I thought once it was filed, I would know what to say. And instead, I just feel like I'm standing on the edge of something enormous and I can't see the bottom. That sounds about right, he said. You were scared? Terrified. For about 4 months straight. He turned his mug in his hands. Then it started to become just real, like something that was happening instead of something to be afraid of. It doesn't go away, but it gets more specific. She exhaled slowly. I don't know who I am outside of that marriage, she said. And I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like something people say in movies, but it's true. And I don't know how to locate myself when the structure goes. You had a self before the structure, he said. I did. She smiled, small and something sad in it. She was pretty interesting. She probably still is. Victoria looked at him, and he was aware of having said something he had not calculated, something just plainly true in the way the water was cold, and the frogs were loud, and the night was what it was. Maybe, she said. The frogs went on. The lake held still. Somewhere a screen door banged in the wind. Thank you for bringing me here, she said. Thank you for showing up, he said. She looked at him for a moment and then back at the dark water, and they sat there until the chill finally drove them inside, and that was the first day at the cabin, and it was enough. Saturday went the way good days sometimes go when nobody is trying to make them into something, slowly, loosely, in no particular direction. Lily had declared at breakfast that she intended to catch a fish before Sunday, and had recruited Victoria into the project with a directness that suggested negotiation was not an option. Victoria had said she had never fished before, which Lily received as a logistical problem and not a disqualifying one. So Ethan found himself on the dock at mid-morning, threading a worm onto a hook, while Lily supervised his technique with the intensity of a field engineer, and Victoria sat beside her on the dock's edge with her feet in the water and an expression on her face that he had not seen before, which was the expression of someone simply existing in a moment without calculating its value or its cost. Keep the line loose until you feel a pull, Lily instructed her. Then you give it a little. Dad, show her the flick. The flick is optional, Ethan said. Dad always does the flick. The flick is a personal stylistic choice. Show her anyway. He showed her. Victoria attempted the flick and got it approximately right on the 3rd try, and Lily said, "There it is," with the satisfaction of a coach who has been vindicated. They sat on the dock for an hour. Nobody caught anything. Lily revised her strategy twice and remained certain that this was a matter of patience and not fish absence. Victoria caught a branch on her fourth cast and spent several minutes untangling it while Lily offered commentary, and Ethan pretended to find something very interesting in the middle distance. "You're laughing," Victoria said. "I'm looking at a bird." "There's no bird." "There was one. It left when you hooked the branch." She pointed the fishing rod at him. "You're supposed to be helpful." "I'm extremely helpful. I found you a branch to practice on." She laughed then, a real one, sudden, like something that surprised her. And Lily looked between them with great interest and said, to no one in particular, "Fish don't like when people laugh. It scares them." "Is that true?" Victoria asked. "Maybe," Lily said, and returned to watching the water with complete seriousness. They ate sandwiches at a picnic table by the shore in the afternoon, and Lily fell asleep on a camp blanket in the sun with the automatic completeness of a small person who does not negotiate with tiredness. Victoria and Ethan sat at the table with their waters and the quiet lake and the occasional bird. "Tell me about before," Ethan said. She looked at him. "Before what?" "You said last night, the woman you were before. You said she was interesting." He lifted a shoulder. "I'm curious." Victoria was quiet for a moment, looking at her daughter. Looking at Lily, he corrected himself, old habit. And then something in her posture shifted, some layer going down. "I grew up in Richmond," she said. "Middle of everything, family that wasn't wealthy, but had a lot of opinions about how wealth looked. I was the first one to go anywhere significant for school, Georgetown, then Wharton for business. I had this idea." She stopped, looked at the water. "I was going to build something. A company, not the kind where you climb someone else's ladder, an actual thing that didn't exist before. I had it half designed in my head by the time I was 26. And instead I met Damien." She said his name the way you say the name of a weather event. Descriptive, past tense. "He was impressive. You have to understand, when I met him, he was genuinely impressive. He had built things. He knew things. He was 20 years older, and it felt like he was handing me a window into a world that would take me twice as long to reach on my own." She paused. "He was also controlling. I didn't have a word for it then. I knew he was opinionated. I knew he preferred things a certain way. I told myself that was competence." "When did you stop telling yourself that?" She thought. "About year 3. But I told myself other things for 4 more years after that." She looked down at the table. "I took over the company he invested in as CEO because he suggested it, and because I was genuinely qualified, and because I thought if I was successful enough, if I built enough, if I proved enough, I would feel like I'd found what I went looking for." She lifted her eyes. "The company is real. The work is real. None of that is the problem." "But you're still waiting to feel it," he said. "I was," she said. Past tense, something shifted. She looked out at the lake. "I don't know when exactly. There was a period, maybe the last 6 months, when I started realizing that I was waiting for a life that was never going to arrive while I was building it in his image. And that's not a small thing to realize." "No," he said. "It's not." "Is this boring?" she asked suddenly, looking at him. "No. You're not just saying that. Victoria, you're one of the least boring people I've spent time with. That's not a compliment. It's just what I'm observing." She looked at him with an expression he still could not fully read. That was something about her, the way the layers were present but not always accessible. "You're very direct," she said. "I get that a lot. I mean it as a compliment." "I know," he said. "It's also just what I'm observing." She shook her head, but she was smiling. The afternoon stretched out around them, warm and unhurried, and Lily slept on in the sun with her sneakers still on and one arm thrown over her face. That evening, Ethan repaired the board on the dock. He had brought the lumber for it. He always brought lumber for something, old habit, same as always having a tool roll in the truck. He was on his knees on the dock with a pry bar when Victoria appeared and sat on an overturned crate near the dock's edge, arms folded, watching him work. "You don't have to watch," he said. "I want to watch. I like watching someone do a thing they know how to do. He pried up the old board. The joists underneath looked okay. No rot, just the board itself warped and split from 2 seasons of weather. He fitted the new board in. Damien can't do anything with his hands, she said conversationally. He would have hired someone for this, then supervised the person he hired and told them how he would have done it differently. Sounds tiring. It's exhausting, she said. Everything is negotiated and evaluated. Nothing is just done. She watched him set the first screw. I used to love doing things myself. I used to make things. I made furniture, actually, when I was in college. Nothing like what you do, just basic joinery stuff. Tables, a bench. I stopped when... She shrugged. When there wasn't time. When it seemed impractical. When the idea of having a workshop was the kind of thing that didn't fit the life I was building. It could fit the life you're building now, he said. She looked at him. Start small, he said. You don't need a workshop. You need a good saw and $40 of wood from a lumber yard. He set the second screw. I have a saw you can have. I have 3. Ethan, it's not charity. I genuinely have more saws than I need. She was quiet for a moment. Why do you have 3 saws? Auctions. You get one for a project and then you see a better one, and the better one's only $30, and then you have a problem. She laughed quietly, and he heard in it something that had loosened since this morning, since yesterday, since the moment she stepped out of the truck and looked at the lake. He finished the last screw and stood, rolling his knees, and tested the board with his weight. It held. He looked at her. Good as new, he said. Better than new, she said. New has never been tested. He looked at her for a moment, and she looked back, and the dock was steady under them, and the lake was going dark gold with the evening, and there was something in the air between them that he did not name, not yet, but that he felt the shape of the way you feel a room's dimensions before your eyes have adjusted to the dark. Come on, he said. Lily's making us watch a nature documentary about beavers. She's been very specific about the beavers. I'm in, Victoria said, and stood, and they walked back toward the cabin with the sky overhead going every color at once. That night Ethan lay in the smaller room with the blue quilts and listened to the lake sounds and the frogs and the distant something that might have been an owl, and thought about the shape of the thing he had not named. He thought about the fact that she was going through something enormous. He thought about the fact that he was someone who had learned, at significant personal cost, the difference between being available and being a landing place. He thought about Lily and about what it meant to be careful. He thought about the way she had said better than new, the way she looked at the lake that first morning. He did not come to any conclusions. He was not someone who came to conclusions quickly, and he had long since made peace with that. But the shape of the thing was there, present and patient, and he fell asleep with the lake outside and Lily down the hall in the bunk beds, and Victoria across the hall in the room with the yellow quilt, and the whole cabin felt, improbably, like exactly the right number of people in exactly the right amount of space. Saturday ended. Sunday waited in the dark, and in the morning Damien Sterling's car would come down the county road and everything would change. But that was still hours away, still on the other side of sleep, and for now the night held, and the lake held, and the frogs went on. Sunday arrived gray and soft, the kind of morning that makes no promises. Ethan was already on the porch with his coffee when the sound reached him. Tires on gravel, slow and deliberate, the way someone drives when they are arriving somewhere they were not invited. He looked up. The car was a black Mercedes, the kind that costs more than some houses, and it rolled into the gravel lot beside his truck with a precision that felt intentional. The man who got out was tall, silver-haired, and wearing what Ethan would later describe to himself as money that wants you to know about it. Pressed weekend clothes, expensive watch, the practiced ease of someone who had spent decades arranging rooms around himself. He stood beside the car and looked at the cabin, and then at the truck, and then, with a slowness that was its own kind of message, at Ethan on the porch. I'm looking for my wife, the man said. Ethan set his mug down. You must be Damien, and you must be the neighbor. He said neighbor the way some people say adequate. Is she here? She's inside. Damien looked at the cabin again. Something moved across his face. Calculation, Ethan thought, not emotion. the kind of look that is taking inventory. I'd appreciate a moment with her. That's up to her, Ethan said. The door behind him opened before Damien could respond. Victoria came out onto the porch in yesterday's jeans and a flannel shirt she had borrowed without asking. Ethan's, he recognized it. And she stopped when she saw her husband standing in the gravel. The color did not leave her face exactly, but something did. Something that had been present for 2 days quietly withdrew. "Damien?" she said. Her voice was flat. "Victoria." He spread his hands. "I was worried. You were unreachable. I told my assistant where I was." "Your assistant isn't me." He said it gently, which was somehow worse. "I drove 2 hours. Can we talk?" She looked at Ethan. He looked back at her and said nothing, because it was not his moment to say anything, and he knew that. "Inside," she said to Damien. Not an invitation, a decision. They went inside. Ethan stayed on the porch. He heard the screen door bang, and then he heard voices. Low at first, the cadence of two people who have had versions of this conversation many times and know all the furniture in the room. He picked up his coffee. It had gone cold. Lily appeared beside him 9 minutes later, barefoot, still in her pajamas, eating a granola bar with the focused satisfaction of someone who has solved the breakfast problem on their own terms. "Who's that man?" she said. "Victoria's husband." She chewed. Looked at the Mercedes. "Why is he here?" "He came to talk to her." "She doesn't look like she wanted to talk to him," Lily said. "No," Ethan agreed. "She didn't." Lily ate the rest of her granola bar and leaned against the porch railing. From inside, the voices had gotten slightly louder. Not yelling, but the contained version of it that is in some ways harder to listen to. Control requiring visible effort. "I don't like his car," Lily said. "You don't have to like it." "It's too clean. Nobody's car is that clean." She folded her granola bar wrapper with great care. "Do you think she's okay?" "I think she will be," Ethan said. It was the most honest answer he had. She would be. The question was what the space between now and will be looked like, and that was hers to navigate. He sat with that, held it, did not go inside. The voices stopped after about 20 minutes. The silence that followed had a different quality than the lake's silence, compressed, unresolved. Then the screen door opened and Damien came out alone. He stood on the porch step and looked at Ethan with an expression that had arranged itself into something reasonable, something almost collegial, as if they were two professionals who had found themselves at the same conference and were making the best of it. "She says she needs the morning," Damien said. "Okay. I'll be at a hotel in town. She knows which one." He looked at the cabin, then back at Ethan. "I'm going to ask you something directly." "Go ahead." "Is something going on here?" Ethan looked at him steadily. "We're neighbors," he said. "We came to the lake for the weekend. My daughter is with us." He let that stand on its own because it was true, and because the truth had the advantage of not requiring support. Damien studied him for a moment with the look of someone who is very good at identifying what people are not saying. "She's going through a difficult period," he said finally. "The divorce—" He stopped, as if he had offered more than intended. Recovered. "She makes decisions when she's overwhelmed that she reconsiders later. I just want to make sure she has space to reconsider." "That's very considerate," Ethan said. Something tightened in Damien's jaw. He recognized when he was not being agreed with. "Just look out for her," he said, and walked to the Mercedes and got in and reversed out of the gravel lot with the same slow precision he had arrived with. Ethan went inside. Victoria was sitting at the kitchen table with both hands around a mug of water. Not tea, not coffee, water, which told him something about where she was, that she had needed something in her hands and had not been able to think far enough ahead to heed anything. He sat across from her, did not ask immediately, let her be in the room for a minute. "How did he know where I was?" she said. "I was going to ask you that." "My phone." She pressed her eyes closed briefly. "He has access to my location through a shared account. I turned it off months ago, or I thought I did. He must have—" She exhaled. "It doesn't matter. He knows." "He said he'd be in town." "Of course he will." She set the mug down, looked at the table. "He does this." He doesn't come for the reason he says he comes for. He comes to remind me that he can, that he knows where I am, that distance isn't actually distance when someone can find you in 2 hours. Ethan was quiet for a moment. What does he want? He wants me to come home. She said the word home with the specific flatness of someone applying it to a place it does not fit. He has a whole version of this story where he is the reasonable one, the patient one, the one who drove 2 hours to find his wife, who is clearly going through something, and if I just came back, we could talk about it like adults. And the divorce filing. He doesn't believe I'll go through with it. She looked up at Ethan. He's never believed it. We've been to the edge before. A separation a few weeks apart 2 years ago. And I came back, and I think he calculates every time that I'll come back that the trajectory always bends back toward him because that's how it's always worked. She pressed her hands flat on the table. That's what I did. I bent back. Every time. But you filed this time. I filed this time. Her voice was very even. And I'm not going back. He looked at her. I believe you, he said. She looked at him like she was checking to see if that was performance. It wasn't. He meant it the way you mean simple things, plainly and without fanfare. Something in her unlocked, just slightly, the way a tension releases after the thing it was bracing against has passed. I don't want to ruin the weekend, she said. You didn't ruin anything. I brought him here, not intentionally, but Victoria. He waited until she was looking at him. The weekend is fine. You are allowed to be dealing with something and also be here. She sat with that. Outside, Lily could be heard on the porch, apparently explaining something at length to the doc. Is she talking to the doc? Victoria said. She does that sometimes. She's working through a theory about fish behavior. The doc is a useful sounding board. He stood. I'm going to make breakfast. Real breakfast, not granola bars. You're going to eat something, and then we're going to figure out what the rest of the day looks like. She looked up at him. You're very practical, she said. Not quite a complaint. I have a 7-year-old. Practical is a survival skill. He made eggs and toast and sliced apples because Lily would not eat eggs without the apples present as a counterweight, which was one of those rules that had emerged without explanation and was now simply part of the physics of breakfast. Victoria ate without ceremony, and gradually the color came back to her face, and Lily came in from the porch and ate sitting sideways in her chair as she always did, reading a page of her book between bites, and the cabin held them all without making a production of it. After breakfast, Victoria told him everything. Not all at once. It came in pieces over the course of the afternoon, the way things do when they have been held for a long time, and the holding has become its own kind of structure that has to be dismantled carefully. They were on the porch again, Lily off somewhere between the shore and the tree line, visible at intervals the way children are when they have given themselves a mission. Victoria talked about the early years of the marriage and how she had told herself the things she told herself, and then the middle years when the telling required more effort, and then the last 2 when she had mostly stopped telling herself anything and just moved through the architecture of a life that increasingly felt like it belonged to someone else's design. He never hit me, she said, and then immediately looked like she was frustrated with herself for leading with that. I say that and I hear how it sounds. Like I'm making an argument for why it wasn't bad, and that's... She stopped. You don't have to make an argument, Ethan said. It's hard not to. People hear the word difficult marriage and they want to know what happened, what the specific thing was, and the specific thing was... She looked at the lake. It was everything small. The way he would correct how I told a story in front of other people. The way my career was always the company he had invested in and never the thing I had built. The way every decision I made got run through this quiet assessment of whether it aligned with what he thought was appropriate for us as a unit. She said unit with a blankness that carried everything. I had opinions, and then I had opinions that had been processed through the question of how he would receive them. I stopped knowing the difference. Ethan did not say anything because there was nothing to say that would improve on what she was saying. I'm angry, she said. I'm very angry, and I've been managing it for so long that I've gotten very quiet about it, and I think people read the quiet as composure. She looked at her hands. You should know that. I'm not composed. I'm just practiced. Okay, he said. That doesn't bother you? Why would it bother me? She looked at him with something that might have been frustration. Because composed is how I present, and it's how people deal with me, And it usually works. When I tell people it's not real, they get... She searched for the word. Uncomfortable, he said. Uncomfortable, she confirmed. You don't need to be composed with me, he said. I'm just a person sitting on a porch. She looked at him for a long time. You make things very simple, she said. I try. It's not an insult. I know. She half laughed, and it was ragged at the edges, and she pressed her knuckles to her mouth for a moment. I'm really very angry, she said again, quietly, like she was testing the truth of it. That makes sense, he said. It'll be part of it for a while. Were you angry after your divorce? Yeah. He thought about those months, saw the specific texture of them, the way the anger had no clean target because he and Christine had both contributed to the failure in their own ways, and blaming her cleanly would have required a simplification he couldn't make himself believe. Mine was different. Mine was quieter, but yeah, for longer than I wanted to admit. What did you do with it? Worked, he said. A lot of physical work, stripping old finishes, breaking things down before building them back up. He paused. I hit a cabinet door once, just once. I wasn't proud of it. She looked at him. What kind of cabinet? Kitchen. One of the upper ones. The hinge was already loose. So you improved it. I cracked the door and the hinge fell off entirely, and I had to buy a new door. He held the straight face for about 3 seconds. It was a low point. She laughed properly this time, and it moved through her like something releasing pressure, and she put her hand over her eyes for a moment and shook her head. Ethan, she said. Yeah. I want to say something, and I need you to not make it weird. He waited. I think I've been feeling something for you for a while, she said. Not since this weekend, not since the cabin, for a while. And I'm telling you because I'm trying to be honest about things instead of managing them, and because you've been... She gestured vaguely at him. At the porch. At the whole 2 days. You've been this. And I think you deserve to know that. The lake was very quiet. Okay, he said. She watched him. That's your response. I'm thinking. All right. He thought. He thought about the morning she had come across the street in her office clothes with the chipped mug. He thought about the way she looked when Lily made her laugh and she didn't see it coming. He thought about what she was in the middle of and what he was still in the middle of and what it meant to feel something for a person versus what it meant to be responsible with it. I hear you, and he said finally. And I think... He stopped, arranged it. I think something is there. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't noticed something, but I'm not... He exhaled. You're in the middle of something enormous right now, and I'm someone who moves slowly. Those two things together mean I'm not going to tell you what I feel like this is yet, because I genuinely don't know, and also because you have enough to carry. She looked at him for a long moment. That's the most careful thing anyone has ever said to me, she said. Is that bad? No. She said it quietly. It's so far from bad. They sat with the lake in front of them, and the afternoon moving overhead, and Lily appearing at the tree line holding something she had apparently found and wanted to show them. She was holding it at arm's length, which suggested it was either exciting or moving. Bug, Ethan called. What is that? A salamander, Lily called back, delighted. He was just sitting there. Okay, you can look, and then he goes back. I know, Dad, I know. She looked at Victoria. Victoria, do you want to see? Victoria glanced at Ethan and then stood from her chair and walked out to Lily, and Ethan watched them crouch together over the salamander, Lily explaining something with great authority, Victoria listening with what appeared to be genuine interest, and the afternoon light came through the trees at the angle it gets in late September when the season is almost done making up its mind. He did not name the thing he was feeling, but he let himself feel it, which was progress. The drive home Sunday evening was different from Friday morning in the way that 2 days at a lake will change the air between people. Not dramatically, not with anything you could point to, but in the small recalibrations that happen when people have eaten meals together and had real conversations and watched each other handle things. Lily fell asleep before they hit the highway, her cheek against the window, the chapter book face down on her lap. The mountains were dark outlines on either side. The radio was off. Victoria was looking at her phone. Messages that had accumulated, the return of the world she had left briefly. He watched her face from the corner of his eye. He saw the moment the composed expression came back, the way it settled over her features like something automatic, like a posture she had trained so long it happened without thought. "You're doing the face," he said. She looked up. "What face?" "The one that means you're processing 12 things and showing none of them." She looked back at the phone. "I have 48 messages. Most of them can wait. 11 from Damien. All of them can wait." She put the phone face down on her knee. "He's going to be difficult," she said. "He's going to fight the divorce. Not because he wants the marriage. I don't think he ever wanted the marriage exactly. I think he wanted the arrangement. But because losing it publicly is not something he'll accept easily." "You have lawyers." "I have lawyers." She looked at the dark road ahead. "It's going to be ugly and long, and he's going to say things about me that are... He has things he can say." She was quiet for a moment. "Things from before. Mistakes I made when I was younger, before the company, before any of this. Things I've never talked about publicly." "Do you want to tell me?" he said. She looked at him. "You don't have to," he said. "But if you're thinking about it from the angle of whether it changes what I think of you, you can just tell me." She was quiet for a long stretch of highway. Then, "When I was 24, before I met Damien, I was in a business venture that went very wrong. A startup, bad decisions, some ethical gray areas that I knew were gray and went ahead with anyway because I was 24 and convinced I was right. The company failed. There were complaints filed. Nothing criminal, but civil and messy, and I settled." She looked at her hands. "Damien knew about it when we got married. He used it when he needed to. Not publicly, just as a reminder that he had the information, and I should remember that." "That's not a mistake," Ethan said. "What he did with it." "The original thing. People are 24 and make bad calls. That's not a defining thing unless you let someone make it one." He kept his eyes on the road. "And from what you're describing, he made it one. That's on him." She did not say anything for a moment. "You didn't even flinch," she said. "Should I have?" "Most people would want more details. To evaluate. It was 15 years ago, and you're clearly a different person. What would the details change?" She looked at him in the dark of the truck cab with something that he could not see fully, but that felt like a person encountering a thing they had been half convinced did not exist. "Nothing," she said quietly. "The details wouldn't change anything." "Okay then." Asheville appeared on the highway signs ahead. The city lights began their faint brightening of the sky. Lily shifted in the back seat, not waking, just adjusting. The truck ate the highway miles steadily. When they got back to Winding Creek Road, he pulled into his driveway and came around to help carry. Victoria stood in the driveway with her bag and looked across the street at the Sterling house. Dark, all the lights off, Damien not home yet, or choosing not to be. She stood there for a moment without moving. "You're all right?" Ethan asked. "I'm all right," she said. Not a performance. She meant it. "I'm going to be all right." "I know." She looked at him in the driveway under the one working porch light, the September night cool around them, and she said, "Thank you for not sending me home Friday. I didn't invite you and then try to uninvite you. You were surprised I came." "I was very surprised you came." 30%, she said. 30% was generous, looking back. She shook her head, but she was smiling. The real one, the one that hadn't been calibrated. She looked at the house across the street one more time, and then she picked up her bag and walked to the end of the driveway and stopped. "Ethan." "Yeah." The chipped mug. She was not looking at him now. "I left it at the cabin." He looked at her back. "I know," he said. "I packed it." She turned around. He could not see her expression clearly in the low light, but he saw her breathe. "Okay," she said. "See you in the morning," he said. She crossed the street and he stood in the driveway until she was inside, and then he carried Lily in from the truck. She didn't wake, just made a small sound and put her arms around his neck. And he put her in her bed, with her shoes still on because he was not going to fight that battle tonight. Then he stood in the kitchen in the quiet house and thought about the weekend and the lake and the things that had been said and the things that hadn't. And he thought about Damien's 11 messages sitting on Victoria's phone. and he thought about a 24-year-old making a bad call and spending 15 years being reminded of it. And something in his chest that was not anger exactly, but was adjacent to it, sat there and did not leave quickly. He rinsed his water glass. He turned off the kitchen light. On the counter by the door, in the tote bag from the cabin, was the chipped blue mug, packed in a dish towel. He looked at it for a moment and then left it where it was and went to bed. The weeks after the cabin settled into something that resembled normal, which was its own kind of strange. Victoria came for coffee every morning, same as before, except that now there was more to the silence between them. Not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that exists between two people who have told each other true things and are still figuring out what to do with the fact of that. She would take the mug, they would talk for 10 or 20 minutes, and she would go back across the street and become the version of herself that ran a company and handled a divorce and did not let either one show on her face in public. Ethan watched this and said nothing about it, because it was not his to comment on. He had his own version of the same management, the way he went into the workshop and let the work absorb whatever was moving around inside him that he did not yet have language for. He stripped a Victorian sideboard down to bare wood over 3 days, and it was some of the cleanest work he had done in months. Lily noticed things the way she always did. "Victoria looked tired this morning," she said one evening, matter of fact, eating dinner. "She has a lot going on," Ethan said. "At work?" "And other things." Lily absorbed this. "The husband?" He looked at her. "How do you know about that?" "I have ears, Dad. You and Greta talk on the porch sometimes." He made a mental note about Greta and porch conversations and the carrying capacity of neighborhood air. "It's complicated," he said. "Most things with grown-ups are complicated," Lily said, with the authority of someone who has observed this pattern for 7 full years and drawn conclusions. "Is she going to be okay?" "Yeah," he said. "She is." "Okay." Lily ate another bite. "Can I bring her some of the cookies I made at school? They came out pretty good." "One of them is shaped wrong, but it still tastes fine." "That's very kind of you, Bug." "I know," she said. The divorce proceedings began producing noise in October. Victoria told Ethan about it in pieces, the way she told him most things, carefully, without drama, but with the underlying tension of someone holding a live wire and trying to stay calm about it. Damien had hired a firm out of Charlotte, expensive and aggressive, the kind of legal team whose job was to make the other side tired before the real fighting started. Her own lawyers were good, she had made sure of that. But good and aggressive were different measurements, and the gap between them was something she navigated daily. "He's contesting the asset division," she said one morning, standing on the porch with the mug. A Tuesday in mid-October, cold enough now for their breath to show. Which is, I expected that. It's standard, but he's also made some preliminary noises about character. She looked at her coffee. "My lawyers think he's positioning, building toward using the startup situation from 15 years ago if the negotiations stall." "Can he do that?" "In a civil proceeding, character can come up in certain contexts. He'd have to make an argument for relevance." She wrapped both hands around the mug. "My lawyer says it's probably a pressure tactic. He wants me to settle lower to avoid the exposure." "And are you going to?" She looked at him. "No," she said. Simple and final. "Okay," he said. "You keep saying that. You keep making decisions I agree with." She looked at him for a moment with something that was not quite a smile but lived in the same neighborhood. "Ethan," she said. "Yeah. I'm going to ask you something. You can ask me things. Is this..." She stopped, which was unusual for her, and started again. "Are we friends?" "Officially, because I'm realizing I don't have many of those and I want to know what I'm working with." He thought about it with the same seriousness he gave anything that deserved seriousness. "Yeah," he said. "We're friends." "Okay?" She seemed to settle slightly. I needed to say it out loud. Because saying it makes it real? Because saying it means I'm not imagining the whole thing. He looked at her. "You're not imagining it." She went back across the street shortly after, and he stood on the porch in the cold October morning and thought about the word friends and what it contained and what it did not contain, and how both of those things were true at once. It was Greta who told him about the article. Greta Hollins was 63 years old, recently retired from a long career in hospital administration, and operated with the information velocity of a small-town newspaper that also happened to know everyone personally. She was not malicious. She was simply a person for whom information was a form of connection, and she connected constantly. She appeared at his workshop door on a Thursday afternoon in late October, while he was staining a set of cabinet doors, holding her phone with the expression of someone who is delivering news they are uncertain about. "Have you seen this?" she said. It was a piece in a regional business publication, Gas. Not major, but read by enough people in the local professional community to matter. The headline was something about leadership transitions and corporate instability, vague enough to be deniable. The article itself was more specific. It discussed Victoria's company, unnamed sources expressing concern about the CEO's focus during a period of personal difficulty. It mentioned the divorce. It mentioned, with careful vagueness, questions about her judgment in past ventures. The past ventures. 15 years ago. "When did this go up?" Ethan said. "This morning," Greta said. "I only saw it because Linda from my book club sent it. Apparently some people in the business community are talking." He read it twice. It was skillfully done. Nothing actionable, everything deniable. The kind of piece that works precisely because it raises questions without making claims. He knew, without being able to prove it, exactly where it had come from. "Does she know?" he said. "I would assume so," Greta said. "She runs a company. She has people who watch for this kind of thing." He set the stain brush down. "Thanks, Greta." "Is she all right?" "She will be," he said. Greta lingered another moment, clearly with more to say, and then appeared to make a decision in favor of restraint and went back to her house. Ethan stood in the workshop and looked at the cabinet doors and thought about a man who drove 2 hours to a lake cabin, not because he was worried, but because he needed to confirm that he still could. Who held a 15-year-old mistake over someone's head because he had identified it as a point of leverage and never let it go? He did not call Victoria. She would come in the morning, and if she needed him before that, she knew where he was. She came that night. It was almost 9 o'clock, Lily already in bed, Ethan at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold and the laptop open to a Finnish supplier's catalog. He was not really reading. A knock at the door. 3 quick ones, not tentative. He knew it was her before he opened it. She was still in her work clothes, the blazer, the professional armor, but something in her posture was off. The careful architecture of it had taken damage. Small fissures visible in the set of her jaw and the way she was holding her hands. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know it's late." "Come in," he said. She came in and stood in his kitchen and said, "He did it. The article. You saw it." "Greta." She made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "Of course." She pulled out a chair and sat down, elbows on the table, and pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes for a moment. "My PR team has been on it all day. The publication won't name sources, obviously. My lawyers are looking at whether there's an angle, tortious interference, defamation, something, but it's—" She dropped her hands. "It's a clean hit. He knows what he's doing. It's designed to be clean. You're bored?" 2 calls today, both supportive technically, but supportive in the way that means we are watching, which is— She exhaled. "It's fine. The company is fine. The numbers are fine. But this kind of noise, at this specific moment in a growth cycle, when we are trying to close a Series B," she stopped herself. "I don't need to explain the mechanics to you." "I follow the mechanics," he said. "He's putting pressure on the company to put pressure on you to settle." "Yes." "And your board making supportive noises is part of that pressure even if they don't mean it to be." She looked at him. "You're good at this." "I renovated buildings for 8 years. There's always someone trying to make the project more expensive so you'll take the low offer." She held his gaze for a moment and something moved through her. Not relief exactly, but the particular easing that comes from being in a room where you do not have to explain the subtext. "I need to know something," she said. "Okay. The thing he's going to use, the startup, the civil complaints, the settlement, if that becomes public, if he finds a way to make it visible, is that going to change things for you? For—" She gestured between them, the word "this" covering too much territory to specify. for whatever this is. He looked at her steadily. No, he said. You haven't heard the details. I don't need them. Ethan? Victoria. He leaned forward slightly. I'm going to say something and you're going to let me finish before you argue with it. A decision you made at 24 badly, under circumstances I don't know but can imagine, that you settled civilly and moved on from, that is not a thing that changes my opinion of you. What he is doing with it right now to pressure you in a divorce, that tells me a lot about him and nothing new about you. He held her look. We clear? She was quiet for a moment. Her jaw was working slightly, the way it did when she was processing something that had come in at an angle she didn't expect. You don't have to, she started. I know I don't have to. I'm doing it because it's true. He picked up his cold coffee, looked at it, put it back down. You want actual coffee, or are you going home soon? She stared at him. Then, slowly, the armor cracked. Not shattering, just the particular way it cracked when something real got through, the way she had looked that first morning at the lake. Coffee, she said. Please. He made coffee. She sat at his kitchen table and they talked. About the case, about the Series B, about what her lawyers were advising, about the 3 or 4 possible directions things could go. He listened and occasionally asked questions and did not offer solutions he wasn't qualified to offer. Around 10:30 he heard Lily moving around upstairs, getting water, padding back to her room. Victoria heard it too and looked at the ceiling. I should let you go, she said. She does that at night. It doesn't mean she's awake. Still. She picked up her coffee cup, looked at the bottom of it. I'm sorry I showed up at 9 o'clock. I wasn't doing anything. You were doing something. You were having a quiet evening. I was staring at a lumber catalog, he said. You improved the situation. She looked at him across the table with an expression he was coming to recognize, the one that appeared when something landed in a way she had not armored for. Thank you, she said. It was very simple, and it was real. That's what... He stopped himself from saying that's what friends are for, because it sounded like something off a greeting card, and also because it wasn't entirely what he meant. You'd do the same, he said instead. I would, she said, and he believed her. Ciao. November arrived cold and committed. The divorce proceedings moved the way legal things move, slowly, with cost at every turn. Damien had rejected the initial settlement offer, as expected. Victoria's lawyers countered. Damien's lawyers made noise about depositions. The article had not had the board effect he had apparently intended. The Series B process continued, cautiously, and Ethan suspected that the failure of that particular maneuver would make Damien less careful in the next one, and told Victoria as much. You think he'll escalate, she said. He tried the quiet version. It didn't work. He was in the workshop. She was leaning in the doorway with her jacket pulled around her, the way she had started doing sometimes on weekend mornings when she didn't have calls, just appearing, fitting herself into the edges of his work. He had stopped finding this remarkable. Pressure shifts when it doesn't land, usually upward. She looked at him. You've dealt with difficult people before. Contractors do. There's always a client who wants to renegotiate mid-project when the walls are open. He set down the sanding block. The move is to stay calm and keep going. The finished thing is the argument. She absorbed that. The finished thing is the argument, she repeated. What gets Damien is not winning a confrontation. It's you being fine in a year. That's what he can't control. Something moved across her face. Not quite anger, not quite relief. A complex thing. I'm going to hold on to that, she said. Hold on to it tight, he said. He's going to try to shake you between now and then. She nodded slowly. Then, because she was someone who did not sit inside gravity without eventually pushing back, you're very good at this, you know, She gestured at him. The being a steady person thing. I'm not always steady, he said. You're steady with me. He looked at her for a moment. Yeah, he said. I am. She held his gaze long enough that it became something more than a casual exchange, and then she looked at the sideboard he was working on. A 19th century piece, walnut, good bones underneath a century of bad decisions. Tell me about this one, she said. He told her. She listened. And the morning went that way, useful and real, the November light coming through the workshop door, the street quiet beyond it. The confrontation, when it came, did not announce itself. It was a Saturday in mid-November, one of those cold gray days where the mountains disappear into cloud and the whole world contracts to whatever is directly in front of you. Ethan had driven to a pickup in Black Mountain, a drop-leaf table someone was donating to the workshop restoration project he ran twice a year for the community center, and Lily was with his sister Nora for the afternoon. He pulled back onto Winding Creek Road at 2:30 to find an unfamiliar car in front of the Sterling house. Not Damien's Mercedes. A rental. He could tell by the plates. He unloaded the table and was wrestling it into the workshop when he heard the front door of the Sterling house open. Then voices on the porch. Victoria's, controlled, and another, male, that was not Damien, but had some of the same register, the same cadence of a person who was accustomed to the room arranging itself around him. He was not trying to hear. Sound carried on a quiet street. "You made your choice," the other voice said. "You filed the papers. That's your business. But what you're doing to this family publicly—" "I'm not doing anything publicly," Victoria said. Her voice was tight in the particular way of someone holding a great deal very carefully. "He filed that article. He called your father's friends. That's not me. He's protecting himself. He's retaliating." "Victoria." The voice dropped into something that was meant to sound reasonable but had weight behind it. "The company, the timing, you're embarrassing him. There are ways to handle this that don't have to be this public. He's willing to negotiate." "We are negotiating. Through lawyers. That's what lawyers are for." "He wants to talk directly." He lost the right to talk directly when he spent 7 years treating every conversation like a negotiation he was determined to win. Her voice cracked at the edge on that one. Not breaking, but the fissure was audible. Ethan set down the table leg he was holding. He stood in the workshop door for a moment, making a decision. Then he walked across the street. The man on Victoria's porch was 40, maybe 42, with Damien's height and a younger version of Damien's bearing. A brother, Ethan assessed, or close to it. He turned when he heard footsteps and looked at Ethan with the particular expression of a person who is doing a calculation about whether an arriving element is relevant. "Ethan," Victoria said. The way she said it was not distressed. It was, he thought, something closer to steadied. "Sorry to interrupt," Ethan said, not slowing down. He came up to the porch steps. "I need to borrow the dolly for the table. Is it in your garage?" He was speaking to Victoria, and the fiction was thin but present. She understood immediately. "It should be by the side door," she said. "Great." He looked at the man on the porch. "Sorry, Ethan Cross. I'm across the street." The man looked at him. "Marcus Sterling, Damien's brother." "Good to meet you." He said it pleasantly and without warmth, which was its own kind of message. Marcus looked between them with the measuring look of someone revising a calculation. "You're the neighbor," he said. "I am," Ethan said. A beat. Marcus looked back at Victoria. "Think about what I said." "I've thought about it," she said. "My answer is no." Marcus came down the porch steps past Ethan and got in the rental car and drove away without looking back. The street went quiet. Victoria stood on her porch with her arms folded and her jaw set and watched the car until it turned the corner. "There is no dolly," Ethan said. "I know," she said. "I wasn't sure what else—" "I know," she said again, and her voice had gone slightly rough. "I'm glad you came over." He leaned against the porch railing. "Damien sent his brother." "Damien sends people. He rarely comes himself when he thinks there might be a scene." She unfolded her arms. "He's recalibrating. The article didn't work. The board calls didn't work. So now it's the personal angle. The family pressure. Does that work on you?" "Not anymore." She said it with a certainty that was not bravado. It was the certainty of someone who has done work to arrive at a conclusion and knows the route by heart now. "It used to." He knew exactly the right people to send, his mother, his business associates, people I respected. But I've had enough time since I filed to remember that the opinions being used against me are not independent opinions. They're his. He's just running them through other mouths. "Smart," Ethan said. "Took me long enough." "That's not a failure. That's learning what you were dealing with." She looked at him. The November wind moved through the street, pulling a few last leaves off the oak at the end of the block. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Always." 3 weeks ago, I almost called him. She said it looking at the street, not at Ethan. Not to go back. I wasn't going back, but I almost called him to ask if we could just make it quiet, settle fast and move on and accept whatever he was offering just to stop the noise. She was quiet for a moment. I didn't, but it was close. "What stopped you?" Ethan said. She finally looked at him. "I thought about what you said. The finished thing being the argument." She held his gaze. "I thought about being fine in a year and what that would feel like from the outside of this, and I decided that whatever he's offering now is not worth what I'd be giving up to take it." The wind came again. She was shivering slightly. She'd come out without a jacket, pulled out by the confrontation before she'd had time to think. "Come inside," he said. "You're going to freeze." "I'm fine." "Victoria, you are visibly cold." She looked down at her arms, conceded silently that he was right. She went inside and he followed, and she made tea this time, both of them, standing in her kitchen, which he had been in once or twice, but not often. And the house was clean and well-designed and had the air of a place that had been arranged for a life that was in the process of becoming something else. "He's going to come himself," Ethan said. "You know that." "I know." "When he does—" He stopped, organized it. "He's going to use everything he has. All of it at once, probably. That's how this kind of pressure works. If the incremental approach fails, you get the full weight." She looked at her tea. "I know," she said again. "I've been thinking about that." She looked up. "I need to be prepared to say it. Out loud, to his face, with nothing between me and it. I've said it in texts, in legal filings, through my lawyers. I haven't said it to him directly since I filed." "You'll be ready," he said. "You don't know that." "I know you've been getting ready for it since the cabin," he said, "whether you knew that's what you were doing or not." She held his gaze across the kitchen island for a long moment. The tea steamed between them. "What if I'm not?" she said quietly. "Then you say it anyway," he said. "You say it and it's hard and it doesn't come out perfectly and it still counts." She pressed her lips together, nodded once, small to herself more than to him. Outside on the quiet street, the November afternoon went gray and colder. Damian Sterling had not come himself yet, but Ethan could feel the shape of what was coming the way you feel weather before it arrives. The particular pressure drop, the quality of the stillness before something breaks through it. Victoria held her tea in both hands the way she had held the blue mug that first morning, and Ethan stood across the kitchen island and said nothing else, because sometimes the most useful thing was simply to be in the room. Damian came on a Wednesday, not a weekend, not an evening, a Wednesday at 11 in the morning, which was its own kind of message. Wednesdays were work days. Wednesdays said, "I don't have to arrange my schedule around you. You arrange yours around me." Ethan was in the workshop when he saw the Mercedes turn onto Winding Creek Road. He recognized it before it had fully cleared the corner, the particular black of it, the way it moved with that deliberate slowness that Damian seemed to have decided was a personality. He set down the spokeshalve he was using on a chair leg and stood in the workshop doorway and watched the car park in front of the Sterling house. Damian got out alone this time. No Marcus, no lawyer, no intermediary. He was dressed the way he had been at the cabin, expensive and controlled, silver hair, the bearing of someone who has spent decades in rooms where other people adjusted their posture in response to his. He stood on the sidewalk and looked at the house for a moment, and then, before going to the door, looked across the street directly at Ethan. It was not a long look. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. But it was deliberate, the look of someone establishing that they have noted the relevant variables. Then he went to the door and knocked. Ethan stayed where he was. He had no claim on what happened inside that house. Victoria was not his to protect in the way that word sometimes implied, as if she were something to be kept rather than someone to be stood beside. She was capable. She had been preparing for this. He knew that. He had watched her prepare for it over 2 months of mornings and evenings and unscheduled conversations, watched the resolve in her solidify from something she had to consciously maintain into something more structural, more weight-bearing. She did not need him to go over there. He went back to the chair leg. He picked up the spokeshalve. He worked for about 11 minutes, and then he heard the front door open across the street. He was at the workshop door before he had consciously decided to move. They were on the porch. Both of them, which meant she had not let him inside, which meant she had prepared for exactly this and had made a decision about the terms of the encounter before he knocked. That told Ethan something. He moved to his own porch, not crossing the street, close enough to see and hear at the edges without making it a performance. "You could have called," Victoria was saying. "I did call," Damien said. "You had your assistant tell me you were in meetings." "I was in meetings. For 3 weeks." "Damien." Her voice had a quality to it he had not heard before. Not cold exactly, but stripped of accommodation. Like something had been removed from it that he had always been able to count on, and the absence was structural. "You have lawyers. I have lawyers. This is what lawyers are for." This has gone further than it needed to. He said it with a kind of measured gravity, the tone of someone who is being the reasonable one in a room that has gotten emotional. "I came because I think we can still find a resolution that doesn't require us to spend 2 more years destroying each other in court. We can find that resolution through our lawyers." "Victoria." He took a step toward her, not aggressive, calibrated. 12 years. We built something. I know it hasn't been what either of us wanted at every point, but you don't throw 12 years away because you're going through a difficult... "Don't," she said. "I'm asking you to consider..." "Don't finish that sentence." The stripped quality in her voice tightened. "Don't tell me what I'm going through. Don't tell me this is a phase or a difficulty or something I'm going to reconsider from the other side of. I have considered it. I considered it for 7 years, and I have arrived at a decision." Damien was quiet for a moment. He looked at the porch railing, at his hands, through the calculation that Ethan could see from across the street happening behind his eyes. "The article wasn't..." he started. "Don't," she said again. "I'm saying it wasn't intended to..." "I know what it was intended to do." She was very still. Hands at her sides, not folded, not gripped, just present and very still. "I know exactly what it was intended to do because I have known you for 12 years, Damien. I know how you apply pressure. I know what you reach for when something isn't going the way you want it to. I know you sent Marcus because you calculated he'd be less inflammatory than coming yourself. I know you waited until a Wednesday because you wanted me to feel that you could show up when it was inconvenient without rearranging anything." She held his gaze. "I know all of it. I've always known all of it. I just didn't say it out loud for a very long time." Something moved in Damien's expression. Not remorse. Ethan did not read it as remorse. It was the particular shift of someone who has had a strategy exposed and is recalculating in real time. "You've been talking to him," Damien said. "To who?" "The neighbor." He said it with the careful evenness of someone who has prepared the word, decided how much weight to give it. "Whatever is happening over there, this conversation is not about Ethan. It became about him when you spent a weekend at a lake with him while you're still my wife." "Legally," she said, "for now." "Victoria." "I was at a lake with a neighbor and his 7-year-old daughter," she said. "If that's the evidence you're building toward, it won't hold. And if you try to use it, my lawyers will find it considerably more interesting to talk about the nature of your absences over the last 4 years. Business trips, conference schedules, the hotel in Raleigh that Marcus's assistant accidentally booked under the company account." She said it evenly, not triumphant, just present with the information. Damien went very still. "My lawyers," she said quietly, "have been thorough." The silence on the porch stretched. A car passed on the street. A dog somewhere down the block was barking at something unremarkable. Then Damien did the thing Ethan had half expected but had not been certain of. He turned and looked directly across the street. At Ethan on his porch, who did not look away, who held the look with the same steadiness he brought to everything. Not as a challenge, not performing anything, just present and entirely unintimidated. Then Damien looked back at Victoria and changed directions entirely. "There are things about you, he said, and his voice had dropped into something quieter and more deliberate, "that people in this city don't know, that your board doesn't know. The Whitmore deal. What actually happened with the investors before the settlement. I've let it stay buried because it was in both our interests." A pause. That calculus changes. Ethan was moving before the sentence finished. He was across the street and on the porch steps in the time it took Damien to register the motion, and Damien turned with the expression of someone who has been used to being the only variable in a room and has just found there's another. "That's enough," Ethan said. Damien looked at him, down slightly, the height difference he would have noted and used if he could. "This is a private conversation." "I heard it from my porch," Ethan said, "which tells you something about how private it is." He stopped at the top of the porch steps, not in Damien's face, not aggressive, but present in a way that occupied space. "You've made your offer. She's given you her answer. Making threats changes neither of those things." "I wasn't speaking to you." "I'm aware." Ethan held his look with the particular steadiness of someone who does not find this person impressive and is not attempting to conceal that. "I'm speaking to you." Damien studied him for a moment with the look of a man who is accessing a file he has prepared. "You're a furniture restorer," he said, the word restorer carrying a freight it was not designed to carry. "I am," Ethan said. "And you feel qualified to insert yourself into—" "You're threatening her on her own porch," Ethan said. "Yeah, I feel qualified." Something flickered in Damien's expression. Not anger exactly, something colder. The particular look of a person who has identified an obstacle and is determining the most efficient way to remove it. "You don't know what you're in the middle of," Damien said. "I know enough," Ethan said. Victoria moved. She came to stand beside Ethan, not behind him, not using him as a barrier, but beside him, shoulders level, and she looked at her husband with 12 years of accumulated things and said, in a voice that was very quiet and very final, "It's over, Damien. I need you to hear that. Not as a negotiating position, not as something I'm going to reconsider, not as a phase. The marriage is over. What's left is paperwork, and my lawyers will handle the paperwork." She held his gaze without flinching. "What you just said about the Whitmore deal, take it to your lawyers. They will tell you the same thing mine will, which is that it's a door that goes both ways and neither of us should open it." She stopped. "Go home." The word home landed the way she intended, in the space where the word meant something he had forfeited. Damien looked at her for a long time. The calculation was visible, the re-inventory, the decision tree executing behind his eyes through options that were narrowing in real time. Then he straightened, the posture of someone who is choosing to leave rather than being forced to, which was the only frame available to him, and looked at Ethan one more time with an expression that contained a great deal of information and no affect whatsoever. "This isn't finished," he said. "For today it is," Ethan said. Damien came down the porch steps, past Ethan without touching him, across the walk, and into the Mercedes. He pulled out with the deliberate slowness that was his signature, and drove down Winding Creek Road without looking back. The street went quiet. Victoria let out a breath that she had apparently been holding for some time. Her hands, Ethan noticed now, were not entirely steady. "You okay?" he said. "Ask me in a minute," she said. He waited. She stood on the porch in the November cold and took several breaths and looked at the street where the Mercedes had been. And then she turned and went inside, and Ethan followed without being asked. So she sat on her couch, the good one, near the window overlooking the back garden, the one that faced the mountains when the clouds allowed. And he sat in the chair across from her, and they were quiet for a while. The house around them made the small sounds houses make, the heat cycling on, a branch against a window somewhere. "The Whitmore deal," he said, eventually. She looked at her hands. "It's the settlement from 20 years ago. The same one. He's always called it the Whitmore deal internally, like it has a name, like it's something he curates." She exhaled. "He's right that it goes both ways. My lawyers found enough about the Raleigh situation. Not just the hotel. There's more. That opening that door would cost him considerably more than it would cost me. He knows that. He said it anyway because he wanted to see if it would land." "Did it?" "It scared me," she said without drama, just honestly. "And then I said what I said, and he stopped." She looked up at Ethan. "You walked across the street." "I did." "You didn't have to." "I know. I could have handled it." "I know that too." He held her look. "You were handling it. I just—" He thought about how to say it without making it larger than it was. I didn't want you to have to handle the threat part alone. The rest of it, yes, but not that part. She was quiet for a moment, watching him. Most people would have stayed on their porch, she said. I'm not most people, he said. And it was not a boast, just a simple true thing. Something in her face did what it sometimes did when something landed too directly to be managed, opened briefly before she could arrange it into something more contained. She pressed her lips together and looked away. I have to call my lawyers, she said. Do that. And I need to brief my board. If he moves on the Whitmore angle, I want them to hear it from me first. Smart. I know. She sat up straighter. The composure was reassembling, piece by piece, which he had watched her do before and knew was not pretense. It was function. It was how she operated, and he did not want to disturb it. I'm going to be fine, she said. I know. You always say that. It's always been true, he said. She looked at him with an expression he had no name for, but was learning the shape of. Then she reached forward and picked up her phone from the coffee table, and Ethan stood, and that was that. The moment became what it needed to become, which was her making calls, him going back to work. He was at her front door when she said, behind him, Ethan. He turned. She was sitting with the phone in her hand, not yet dialed, looking at him from across the room. Thank you, she said. For real, not the polite kind. I know the difference, he said. You're welcome. He went back across the street. He went back into the workshop. He stood at the bench for a moment without picking anything up, just breathing, feeling the adrenaline that had not been visible when it was needed and was only now making itself known. His hands were slightly unsteady. He held them flat on the workbench and looked at them and waited for it to pass. December came, and with it the settlement. Not the final one, that would take until spring, the lawyers had made that clear, but the framework. The asset division, negotiated at significant cost to both sides' patients and considerable cost to both sides' bank accounts. Victoria called him on a Tuesday afternoon when it was finalized, and he could hear in her voice the specific exhaustion of someone who has been tightly wound for months and has just, in this particular and limited way, been released. The house is mine, she said, which I knew it would be. It's in my name, but there was... He made a run at it anyway, through a shared investment argument. She stopped. He didn't get it. Good. The company holdings, the equity. There were some concessions, less than I wanted, more than he wanted, which my lawyer says means it's fair. A pause. I don't know if it's fair. I know it's done. Done is its own kind of fair, he said. She made a sound that was almost a laugh. My lawyer said something very similar. I'm starting to think you should have been in family law. I don't have the patience. You have enormous patience. I have specific patience, he said, for specific things. A pause on the line. Then more quietly. Are you one of those things? He was in the kitchen, standing at the window looking at the backyard. The December garden had the spare, honest look of things stripped to their structure. He thought about what she was asking, which was not a small thing dressed up as a casual one. Yeah, he said. I am. She was quiet for a moment. Okay, she said. I just needed to know. I know. I'm not asking for anything right now, she said. I want you to understand that. I know this is still all very much in the middle of something. We're both in the middle of something, he said. That doesn't mean it goes nowhere. It means it goes slowly, she said. I move slowly, he said. You know that about me. I know that about you, she confirmed, and her voice had something in it then. Not quite warmth, not quite relief, something that sat between those things and was its own thing. Get some sleep tonight, he said. You've been running on fumes for 2 months. I will. A pause. Lily has a winter concert. I saw the flyer in your mailbox. She does. She's playing recorder. She's been practicing Jingle Bells for 3 weeks. He thought about the right word. Committed. She's committed to everything, Victoria said. It's her best quality. Don't tell her that. She'll find more things to be committed to. She laughed, and it was the real one, and he heard in it the first sound of something that was actually lighter. Not performed lightness, but the beginning of actual weight leaving. He held the phone after they hung up and looked at the yard for a moment longer. He thought about the question she had asked. Are you one of those things? He thought about how long it had taken him to understand that being steady for someone was not the same as standing still. That patience was not passivity, that he had spent the last 2 years believing that keeping his own life small and manageable was the way to protect Lily and himself from further damage. And somewhere between early September and this December Tuesday, that belief had started to look less like wisdom and more like habit. He did not make any declarations to himself. That was not how he operated. But he noticed the shape of what was changing, the slow tilt of it, the way a house settles into its foundation over years. Not dramatic, not sudden, but real, and you could feel it in the floor if you knew where to stand. Lily's winter concert was on the second Thursday of December, held in the gymnasium of her elementary school, which had been decorated with the particular ambitious chaos of children who have been given crepe paper and no restraints. Ethan sat in the folding chairs with the other parents and the siblings and the grandparents and watched his daughter on the risers in the second row, wearing the white shirt she had ironed herself that morning, badly but entirely, with the focused expression of someone who has been waiting for this moment for 3 weeks. Beside him, Victoria sat with her coat in her lap and her hands folded over it, watching the stage. She had asked, 2 days earlier, tentatively, whether it would be strange if she came. He had said it would not be strange. She had asked whether Lily would mind. He had asked Lily. Lily had said, with the purity of someone for whom this was not complicated, "Tell her to sit on your side so she can see better from the left." So she was on his left, and Lily could see her from the second row, and when the recorder ensemble began their performance of a carol that was recognizably Jingle Bells under the right interpretive framework, Lily found Victoria's face in the audience and grinned. The 7-year-old version of a grin, large and ungoverned. And Victoria smiled back, and Ethan, sitting between them in the gymnasium with the crepe paper and the folding chairs and the joyful noise of 20 small children playing recorders, felt something settle in him that had been unsettled for a long time. Not everything, not all at once. He was not built for all at once, but something. After the concert, in the parking lot, Lily showed Victoria the small gold star sticker her music teacher had put on her program for participation and explained at length the judging criteria, which she had determined were based primarily on volume and confidence, both of which she felt she had demonstrated at professional levels. "I think you were the loudest," Victoria confirmed. "I know," Lily said. "I could tell." Ethan looked at Victoria over his daughter's head. She looked back at him. In the parking lot lights, in the December cold, with her breath showing and her coat pulled around her, and Lily still narrating the technical aspects of recorder excellence between them, she looked like someone who was standing in the right place and knew it. He did not say anything. She did not say anything. They walked to his truck and he drove them home through the December streets. And that was the night, ordinary and sufficient and in its own quiet way, exactly what it needed to be. The divorce would not be final until March. The Series B would close in February after 3 weeks of negotiations that would cost Victoria £12 and a quantity of sleep she had not yet recovered. The Whitmore angle never materialized. Damien's lawyers had apparently told him what Victoria's told her, and the door stayed closed. His name would appear in a trade publication the following spring in connection with a compliance issue unrelated to Victoria, and she would read the article on her phone on her kitchen counter and feel something that was not satisfaction, but was the absence of the fear that had accompanied his name for years. But that was spring, and this was December, and the street was quiet when they got back to Winding Creek Road, and the chipped blue mug was on Ethan's kitchen counter where it lived now, and Lily fell asleep in the truck again, and Ethan carried her in while Victoria stood on the porch and waited, and when he came back out, she said goodnight and crossed the street, and he watched her go inside the way he always did. The street held the ordinary silence of a winter Thursday. He went inside and turned off the porch light and stood in the kitchen for a moment in the quiet of the house, his daughter asleep upstairs, the mug on the counter, the December cold pressed against the windows. He was not finished being careful. He was not finished being slow. There was still a great deal of distance between here and whatever came next, and he intended to cross it the only way he knew how, which was one day at a time, with his eyes open, without mistaking momentum for direction. But the shape of the thing was clear to him now. Had been clear for some time, if he was honest. He was simply someone who needed to be honest for a while before he said it out loud. He turned off the kitchen light and went upstairs, and the house settled around him into the particular quiet of a place where people are building something without calling it that yet. You said, Part 5. Lưu ý, viết 6.000 đến 6.500 từ liên kết, liên mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện và hội thoại tạo thành một câu liên mạch khi ghép lại. Part 5 lưu ý. Viết 6.000 đến 6.500 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện và hội thoại tạo thành một câu liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện uyển ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch, sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ, phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc. Kể theo ngôi thứ 3, giữ đồ kịch tính không viết lan man, có quan điểm cá nhân, thông điệp, bài học, góc nhìn con người. Nhân vật không hoàn hảo, hội thoại tự nhiên, tránh ngôn ngữ văn chương sáo rơi và cụm từ AI điển hình. Viết như nhà văn chuyên nghiệp, không như AI cố gắng nghe sang. Có yếu tố con người, cấm miêu tả qua mượt mà và hoàn hảo, phần 5 giải quyết hết vấn đề và kết thúc trọn vẹn câu chuyện. Câu chuyện không nhắc đến Chúa. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document. Chỉ dẫn bắt buộc, không được xuất hiện trong nội dung truyền. Đây là một câu chuyện điện ảnh hoàn toàn hư cấu được tạo ra chỉ nhằm mục đích giải trí. Không đề cập hay ngụ ý rằng nó dựa trên sự kiện có thật, người thật hoặc câu chuyện có thật. Không sử dụng các cụm từ như dựa trên một câu chuyện có thật, theo ghi chép hoặc bất cứ điều gì tương tự. Tất cả các nhân vật, địa điểm, tổ chức và sự kiện phải hoàn toàn hư cấu. Showmore 13 giờ 48 phút, Claude responded. Part 5, The Finished Thing. Part 5 it posipam, The Finished Thing. March arrived the way it always does in the mountains, reluctantly, in fits, with cold mornings and warm afternoons, and weather that couldn't commit to either one. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday, the 11th, which was also the day the Series B closed and the day Lily lost her first tooth, and Victoria said afterward that she would always think of that Tuesday as the day 3 things ended and 3 things began, which was exactly the kind of thinking that meant she was going to be all right. Ethan found out about the divorce the way he found out about most things from her, directly, without ceremony. She knocked on his workshop door at 6 in the evening, still in her work clothes, holding a bottle of wine she had apparently bought from the place on Lexington that she liked, and he had been to twice. "It's done," she said. He looked at her. "Officially?" Judge signed it at 2:15. She held up the bottle. "I didn't want to drink this alone." "I don't have wine glasses," he said. "I brought those too." She held up a small bag with her other hand. He looked at her standing in the workshop doorway with the wine and the glasses and the particular expression of someone who has just set down something very heavy and is still adjusting to the changed weight of the world, and something in him that had been patient for a long time felt the patience resolve into something else. Not urgency, but clarity. "Come in," he said. They sat on the workbench stools, the good ones, the ones he kept near the window, and she opened the bottle with the efficiency of someone who has opened many bottles, and he found the shop glasses he kept for water, and she poured anyway and said they would do fine. The workshop was warm. The evening light came through the side window at the angle it got in early March when the sun was starting to remember its job. "How do you feel?" he said. She thought about it honestly, which was something she had gotten more comfortable with over the months. Not giving the managed answer, not the answer she had decided on before the question arrived. "Tired," she said, "and lighter, and a little scared of the lighter, because I've been carrying something for so long that the absence of it feels unfamiliar." "That passes," he said. "I know." She turned her glass in her hands. "I keep waiting for the relief to be cleaner. It's not clean. It's complicated, and it has different layers, and some of them don't feel like relief at all." She looked at him. "Is that normal?" "I don't think there's a normal," he said, "but it sounds right." "You're very careful with language," she said. "I'm careful with most things." "I know." She held his gaze. "I've been watching you be careful for 6 months. And? And I think careful is the right word. I don't mean it the way some people mean it, as a criticism. Like careful means held back, means not fully present. That's not what you are. She set her glass down on the workbench. You're careful the way good work is careful, the way this is careful. She put her hand on the surface of the sideboard he had been finishing, the walnut one, the 19th century piece, the one that had taken him 4 months because he had refused to rush it. You gave this exactly what it needed and not more and not less, and it became what it was supposed to be. He looked at her hand on the walnut surface, then at her. Victoria, he said. I know, she said. I'm making a point with furniture. The point lands, he said. She looked at him for a long moment, the way she looked when she was not managing anything, just looking, just being in the room with him. I think I've been in love with you for a while, she said. Not the cabin, before the cabin. Somewhere around the 3rd or 4th morning with the mug when I realized I was coming over because I wanted to see you, and the coffee was just the story I was telling myself to make it less complicated. He did not say anything immediately. She had told him this before, at the lake, and he had been careful then, which was right. But careful then and careful now were different positions. I know, he said. She looked at him. You knew. I didn't know what to do with knowing. And now? He looked at his hands for a moment, the hands that had taken broken things and returned them to themselves for 3 years, and thought about the question she was asking, which was not a small one and deserved not a small answer. Now I think I've been waiting to be sure, he said. Not of you. I was sure of you a long time ago. Of myself. Of whether what I felt was what I thought it was, or whether it was something else. Gratitude, proximity, the particular closeness of watching someone go through something hard. He looked up at her. I wanted to be honest about which one it was. And? It's not those things, he said. It's been those things alongside it, but the thing underneath all of them. He stopped, and she waited because she had learned to wait for him to finish. I love you, he said. That's the accurate word, and I've known it for a while, and I wanted to make sure I was saying it for the right reasons before I said it. The workshop was very quiet. Outside, a car passed on the street. She breathed in once, slowly. Then she reached across the workbench and put her hand over his. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. They sat there in the workshop in the March evening with the wine and the walnut sideboard and the whole unfinished and worthwhile length of what came next in front of them. And neither of them said anything for a while, because some things don't need more words after the right ones have finally been said. What came next was not a movie. That is worth saying, because stories like this one invite a particular kind of expectation. The idea that love confessed is love resolved, that the hard part ends when the right things get spoken. The hard part does not end. It evolves. The nature of the difficulty changes, which is not the same as the difficulty going away. Victoria moved out of the Sterling house in April and into a rental on the north side of Asheville while she figured out what she actually wanted. Not what made sense structurally, not what minimized disruption, but what she actually wanted, which was a question she was learning to answer without first running it through the filter of someone else's preferences. The house across the street was listed and sold by June. Ethan stood on his porch the morning the for sale sign went up and felt something complicated. The house had been part of the landscape of this, the daily fact of her presence, and now it was becoming something else, which required adjustment. They saw each other several times a week. Not every day. That was a thing they discussed, actually, sitting at his kitchen table in April with the windows open and the spring air coming through, the question of how to do this without making the same mistakes either of them had made before. I need to not do the thing where I lose myself in it, she said. I did that before and it wasn't his fault entirely. I participated. I let the relationship become the structure I organized my identity around, and when the relationship was wrong, the identity went wrong with it. I know, he said. I'm not saying I want something small, she said quickly. I'm not hedging. I want this. I want you. I just also want to make sure I stay a whole person inside of wanting it. That's exactly what I want too, he said. For you and for me. He turned his coffee cup. I have a tendency to manage, to contain, to make myself and whatever I'm feeling very small and predictable so it doesn't take up space that belongs to Lily. He looked up at her. I need to let it be bigger than that. I don't think I've let anything be as big as it actually is since the divorce. She looked at him for a long moment. We're both going to be annoying to each other sometimes, she said. Definitely, he said. And there's Lily. There's Lily, he agreed. Which was not a complication exactly. Lily was the constant, the given, the fact around which everything arranged itself. She knows something shifted. She's 7. She notices things and files them. I know she does. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Has she said anything? She asked me last week if Victoria was my girlfriend, he said. Victoria looked at him. What did you tell her? I told her it was complicated. And she said? She said adults always say that when the answer is yes, but they don't want to explain it yet. He held her gaze. She's not wrong. Victoria laughed, the real one, the one that moved through her without permission, and pressed her fingers to her mouth for a moment. She terrifies me sometimes, she said. In the good way. She has that effect, he said. There was a conversation with Lily that Ethan had been approaching the way you approach a thing you know is necessary, but want to do right. He was not someone who believed in false simplicity with children. Lily was not a child you could give a simplified version of something and expect her not to find the edges. She would find the edges. She would examine them and report back with questions. He had it on a Saturday in May, the two of them in the workshop, Lily ostensibly helping him sand a small bedside table and actually mostly watching him work and asking questions about the grain of the wood and whether trees knew when they were being cut down. Can I talk to you about something? He said. She looked up from the piece of sandpaper she was holding. Okay. You know how Victoria and I spend a lot of time together? Yeah. And you know she and her husband aren't married anymore? Yeah. You said it was complicated. She waited, with the patience of someone who has been told to wait and is waiting under protest. Victoria is someone I care about, he said, not just as a neighbor, as... He thought about the word. More than that. She's important to me. Lily considered this with the seriousness it deserved. Like a girlfriend, she said. Something like that. Is she going to move in? No, not right now. Nobody's moving anywhere. He set down his sanding block. I just wanted you to know what's true, because you live here too, and it affects you, and I don't want you to feel like things are happening around you that nobody explained. Lily was quiet for a moment, turning the sandpaper over in her hands. Do you love her? She said. The directness of a child asking a direct question is its own particular experience. There is nowhere to go with it. He thought about all the ways he could soften it or redirect it, and chose not to. Yeah, he said. I do. Lily nodded slowly, processing. Does she love you? She does. Another silence. A longer one. He let it be. She's nice to me, Lily said finally. Like, actually nice. Not the fake nice where people talk to you like you're younger than you are. She is, he agreed. And she learned to fish, sort of. A pause. She's better than she was. She is. Lily set the sandpaper down and looked at him with the full weight of her attention, which was significant. Okay, she said. Okay? I mean, she shrugged with the elaborate casualness of a 7-year-old trying to communicate that they are being mature about something. Okay, it's fine. I like her. A pause. She should still come for coffee. That should stay. That'll stay, he said. Lily picked the sandpaper back up and returned to her section of the bedside table, and the conversation was over in the particular way of children's conversations, complete and then simply done, with no residue of drama. Ethan watched his daughter work for a moment, this small, serious, occasionally overwhelming person who was the axis around which everything else organized itself, and felt a love for her that had no language available to it and needed none. The months moved the way months do when they are full of things. Not slowly, not quickly, but with the density of a time that would seem shorter in memory than it was to live through. Victoria closed the Series B in February, late, 3 weeks past the original target date, which she had not slept well for, but it closed. She expanded the team, brought in a COO she had been circling for 2 years, moved the company's Asheville office into a larger space downtown. She was building something that was genuinely hers now, with no one else's vision as the baseline, and the difference showed, not in the outcome, which was still uncertain in the way all building is uncertain, but in the quality of her attention. She was not managing her own ambition anymore. She was using it. She took a weekend at the cabin in June, alone, and came back with the look of someone who has confirmed something they already knew but needed to verify in person. She started doing woodworking on Sunday mornings. Basic things, a bookshelf, a small stool, in the corner of her rental's basement that she had set up with the saw Ethan had given her, and an increasing collection of hand tools she had acquired with the particular intensity of someone discovering a thing they had always been suited for. "The shelf is crooked," she told him in August. "How crooked?" "Measurably crooked, visibly crooked. A marble would roll off it." "You want me to look at it?" "I want to fix it myself," she said. "I just want to know if the crooked happened in the marking or the cutting." "Almost certainly the marking," he said. "Cutting follows the mark. If the mark is wrong, the cut is wrong." She thought about that. "So if you get the beginning wrong, the rest follows." "Usually," he said. "Sometimes you can correct mid-process, but it's harder. Better to check the mark before you cut." She looked at him for a moment with an expression he recognized as her filing something away. "Okay," she said. "I'm going back to the beginning." He smiled. She went back to the shelf, and it was level by Sunday afternoon, and she texted him a picture of it with a marble sitting on the surface, not rolling anywhere. And he looked at the picture in his workshop and felt something that was adjacent to pride, but was also its own thing. The feeling of watching someone become more fully themselves in real time, which is one of the quiet privileges of being close to a person over time. The proposal was not planned. That was the truest thing about it. He had thought about it seriously, in the way he thought about serious things, which was to say carefully and at length and from multiple angles. But he had not scheduled it, not arranged it, not set a date in his calendar with a reminder. He had thought that when the time was right, he would know, and he trusted that assessment, and he was right to trust it. They were at the cabin for the second time. Not the same weekend as the first. This was October, 14 months after that September morning when she had appeared in his driveway with a weekend bag and turned his careless invitation into something that changed both their lives. Lily was there, and Ethan's sister Nora and her husband Paul, and a friend of Victoria's from business school named Josephine, who had driven from Charlotte and brought enough food for twice as many people and was, in Ethan's assessment, exactly the kind of person Victoria needed more of in her life. It was Saturday evening. Nora and Paul had taken Lily fishing off the dock. Lily had organized this, had assigned Paul the role of assistant fisher and Nora the role of moral support. And Josephine was inside doing something with the food that involved a great deal of deliberate concentration. And Ethan and Victoria were on the porch in the October dusk with mugs of coffee and the lake going silver below the tree line. The chipped blue mug was in Victoria's hands. This had happened organically over the months. The mug had migrated from his kitchen counter to a state of shared ownership that no one had formalized, but that felt as natural as anything else between them. She held it the way she had always held it, both hands, which he had come to understand was not a posture of coldness but of presence. She held things she valued with both hands. The mountains were doing their fall thing, the colors burning down from green through amber to the deep rust and gold that would be gone in 3 weeks. The lake held the sky. The dock held Lily, who could be heard explaining something important to Paul, who was responding with the patience of a man who understood that this was what was required of him. Ethan looked at the woman beside him in the October dusk. He had been looking at her for 14 months with increasing clarity, the way you see something better the longer you look without looking away. He saw the person she had been afraid she had lost, and then found again. He saw the person who had walked across a street in her office clothes with the chipped mug because she needed coffee, and also because she needed something she did not yet have a name for. He saw the person who had stood on her own porch in November and told a man who had held power over her for 12 years that it was over, in a voice that did not shake. He saw that she was also, at this moment, watching the lake with the quiet focus of someone who was genuinely at peace, which was not something he had seen from her in those first weeks. The peace had come slowly, and it had come from her own work, not from him, which was as it should be. He reached into the pocket of his jacket. He had made the ring in his workshop. Silver, simple band with a small inlay of walnut wood. The same walnut from the sideboard she had touched the night of the divorce finalization. the night she had made her point with furniture. He was not a jeweler. He was a furniture restorer. But he knew how to work with his hands, and he had taken his time with it, and the ring was true in the way things are true when they are made slowly and with honesty and not for anyone's approval. "Victoria," he said. She looked at him, and she saw the ring in his hand, and something crossed her face that he would spend a long time afterward trying to describe and never quite manage. It was not surprise exactly. She had known where they were going. They had both known for a while. It was something more like recognition. The feeling of arriving somewhere you have been moving toward without fully admitting the destination. "Oh," she said, very softly. "I know we've been careful," he said. "I know we've taken it slow, and I know that was right, and I don't regret any of the slowness. But I've been sure for a while now, and I think you have too, and I figure—" He stopped, and she was watching him with that open expression she only had when she was not managing anything. "I figure the finished thing is the argument." Her breath went out. "I want to build a life with you," he said. "Not a particular kind of life, not a life that looks like anything specific, just a life. With you in it as a permanent fact rather than a daily miracle I'm hoping continues." He held the ring toward her. "I'm not great at speeches, you know that." "I know that," she said. "So that's what I have." She looked at the ring and then at him, and she said, "Yes." Before he had fully extended his hand, said it cleanly and without hesitation, and without the pause he had half expected, because she was someone who thought carefully before speaking, and this time she did not need to think. "Yeah?" he said. "Ethan, yes." Something broke open in her voice, not sadly, the way something breaks when the pressure that has been held against it releases. "Stop asking. Yes." He put the ring on her finger and it fit, which it should have because he had measured carefully, but still. It fit. And she held her hand up and looked at it in the October light, and then she turned and put both arms around him and held on in the way of someone who has stopped keeping track of how much they need something. From the dock, Lily's voice. "Did he ask her?" Ethan and Victoria pulled back and looked at the dock. Lily was standing at the end of it, the good end, not the end with the once loose board, looking at the porch with enormous eyes. Paul was behind her trying to manage the fishing rods, and Nora was beside him with a hand over her mouth. "Lily," Ethan said, "were you watching?" "I was watching for fish," she said, with an innocence that convinced no one. And then, "Did you ask her? Because Aunt Nora said maybe this weekend, but I didn't know when." "Lily," Nora said. "What?" "I didn't tell anyone. Josephine already knew. She doesn't count." From inside the cabin, Josephine's voice muffled, "I heard that." Victoria laughed, the complete one, the full version of it. And Ethan shook his head and looked at the dock where his daughter was still vibrating with the news and called, "Yes, I asked her." "And?" Lily demanded. "She said yes, Bug." Lily turned to Paul and said, "I knew it," with the conviction of someone whose prediction has been vindicated, and then she launched herself up the dock toward the porch, running the way she always ran, which was at full speed with no particular concern for destination, and she hit the porch steps at pace and stopped in front of Victoria and looked at her and said, very seriously, "Are you going to live with us?" Victoria looked at Ethan. He looked back at her. "We haven't worked all the details out yet," he said. "But eventually?" Lily pressed. "Eventually," Victoria said. "Yes." Lily processed this. She looked at the ring. She looked at Victoria's face. Then she said with the measured gravity of someone handing down a significant verdict, "Okay, you can have the room with the yellow quilt when we come to the cabin." Victoria pressed her lips together. "That's very generous." "I know," Lily said. "It's the nicest one." She went back inside to find Josephine and report, and Nora and Paul came up from the dock, and the evening became the kind of evening that is too full to summarize, full of voices and food and the particular noise of people who care about each other gathered in a warm place while the October night comes down outside. They married the following June at the lake. Ethan's family, Victoria's family, her mother, who had cried on the phone for 20 minutes when Victoria told her and then recovered and called back to ask about the catering, Josephine, Nora, and Paul, Greta from down the street who had driven 2 hours and arrived early and was visibly delighted to have been right about everything she had apparently suspected from the beginning. A handful of Victoria's colleagues who had become genuine friends over the 2 years of building, some of Ethan's restoration clients who had become something more than clients over time. The ceremony was at the water's edge in the late afternoon when the light was gold and specific. Lily was the flower girl and had opinions about the execution of that role that she had shared at length in the preceding weeks, and she walked it with the committed exactness of someone performing a task they have rehearsed into the realm of art. A friend of Ethan's from his contracting days, ordained for the occasion, performed the ceremony. It was short. They had both agreed on short. Neither of them wanted a ceremony that worked harder than the marriage itself, that tried to carry the weight of the thing in language rather than letting the thing carry itself. They said the things they meant. They did not say many extra things around the things they meant. Victoria had written her own vows. She told him, in front of everyone, that she had spent a long time confusing the structure of a life for the life itself, and that knowing him had taught her the difference. She said that he was the most patient person she had met, and also occasionally the most stubborn, and that these were, in her view, the same quality in different contexts. She said that she had loved him slowly and with her whole self, and she intended to keep doing that indefinitely. He had also written his. He told her that he was someone who worked with broken things for a living and had learned that broken was never the last word on a thing, only a moment in its history. He said that he had been afraid after the divorce, that the version of himself that was willing to try again had been lost somewhere in the aftermath, and that she had not fixed that. He had fixed that, but that she had made him want to do the fixing, which was its own significant thing. He told her that he chose her specifically for all the specific reasons that added up to her, and that he planned to keep choosing her daily, which was, in his experience, what love actually was. Lily, standing beside him as a sort of unofficial witness, reached up during the vows and put her hand in his, which was the kind of thing she did without announcing it, and he held on without looking down. The photographer caught it. He did not know until he saw the photos weeks later. His daughter's small hand in his, Victoria's face open and wet at the edges, the lake and the mountains behind them, the gold light doing its afternoon thing. He looked at that photograph for a long time when it arrived. On the small table near the ceremony setup, placed there that morning by Lily, with the deliberateness of someone who understood that objects can hold meaning the way people hold feelings. On that table sat the chipped blue mug. Someone had put a small bouquet of wildflowers inside it, yellow and white, the informal kind, the kind that looked like they had been gathered from the field rather than arranged by someone with a design degree. No one would say, afterward, exactly who had done it. Ethan suspected Lily, who denied it with the eyes of someone absolutely responsible. There is something worth saying about what the story actually is, underneath the story, because it would be easy to read it as a story about two people finding each other, which it is, but only on the surface. Underneath, it is a story about what it takes to become someone capable of the right thing at the right time. And that process is slow and unglamorous and involves a lot of wrong moves and misread situations and years of carrying things you cannot put down until you learn how. Victoria spent 12 years in a structure she mistook for a life. That is not stupidity. That is not weakness. That is what happens when you are intelligent and capable and have been taught by small degrees to run your own perception through someone else's framework until you cannot trust what you see. The returning to herself was not dramatic. It did not happen in a single moment of clarity. It happened in the filing of papers, in the lake morning, in the conversation on the porch in November when she found words she had been building for years without knowing she was building them. It happened in the crooked shelf and the level shelf, in the Sunday mornings in the basement with the saw, in every small decision made according to what she actually wanted, rather than what served a story someone else was telling about her. Ethan spent 2 years making himself small. That is also not weakness. That is what happens after loss, the way you restructure around the wound, how you begin to treat your own needs as a liability rather than a fact. He built good things during those years. He raised his daughter well. He was not wasted by the smallness. But there is a difference between surviving and choosing, and somewhere between a careless invitation and a gold October evening on a porch, he found his way back to the difference. Neither of them was ready when they met. That is the actual point. You do not find a person and become ready. You do the work, the grinding, private, uncinematic work, and you become ready, and then a person is there if you are willing to see them. And here's the other thing, the one that does not make it into most versions of this kind of story. The mug, not the object, what the object was. A chip in the rim that she had said she used to mind and then came to like. The difference between the thing being broken and the thing being itself. The distinction that only becomes visible when you stop requiring perfection as the condition of value. Lily had asked her that first morning, "Does the chip bother you?" She had said, "It used to. Now I kind of like it." "Because it's different from the other mugs," Lily had said. "Something like that," Victoria had said. "The something like that was this. Because it had a history. Because the damage was not damage anymore, it was just part of what the thing was. Because the chipped version was the true version, and the unchipped version, the intact original that existed before, was not actually more valuable, just less tested. People are like that. Marriages, if they are the right ones, are like that. The question is not whether you are whole when you arrive. The question is whether you're honest about what you are, and whether the person beside you looks at all of it. The chips, the repairs, the marks that don't come out, the places where something was broken and reset, and holds it in both hands anyway. The summer after the wedding, Lily turned 9. Her birthday was a Saturday, and she wanted a lake party, which was not a negotiation but a declaration. And so there was a lake party set. Children from her class, several adults, a quantity of food that Josephine organized with the focused energy of someone who considers this a professional skill. A rented canoe that 6 children attempted to share simultaneously with predictable results. At the end of the day, when the guests had gone and the evening had settled over the water, Lily sat on the dock with her feet in the lake and declared that 9 was going to be a significant year. "What makes you think so?" Victoria asked. She was sitting beside her. "I can feel it," Lily said, with the certainty of someone in full possession of their instincts. "I believe you," Victoria said. Lily looked at the water. "Victoria?" "Yeah? I'm glad you came that morning, with the mug." Victoria looked at her, this child who noticed everything and filed it and pulled it back out when it was relevant and had opinions about sandwiches and fish feelings and the judging criteria of recorder concerts. This child who had put a bouquet of wildflowers in a chipped mug at a lakeside ceremony and then denied it with perfect composure. "Me too," Victoria said. "I told him you were pretty," Lily said. "That first morning, he told me to go eat my breakfast." Victoria laughed. "He was already—" Lily did a gesture with her hand, vague and comprehensive, that somehow communicated everything. "He just needed time." "He did," Victoria said. "So did I." Lily looked at the water with her feet in it and accepted this as the reasonable and accurate thing it was. From the porch, Ethan's voice. "Lily, are you interrogating her?" "I'm having a conversation," Lily called back. "Those are often the same thing with you." "I know," Lily said, to the lake, unbothered. The evening held. The mountains held. The lake was still and deep and cold and reliable, the way the best things are reliable, well, not because nothing ever disturbs the surface, but because the depth is real and the depth remains. Ethan came down from the porch and sat on the dock beside them, and the 3 of them were there at the end of the day with the summer fading around them and the water going dark gold with the last of the light, and none of them needed to say what this was. It was the finished thing. And the finished thing, as it turned out, was not an ending, but a state, ongoing, imperfect, requiring daily maintenance capable of lasting, which is all any good thing ever is.